Hey, welcome to Vortex Garage, and definitely an exciting video for today. Well, at least it's exciting for me because we've got one of my all-time favorite vehicles in the shop. That is this, a Triumph TR6. Everyone who watches this channel knows I'm definitely a fan of Triumph cars. In fact, we are working on a full restoration of a very early Triumph Spitfire, which is out behind the camera there. But I've also been a huge fan of the TR series from Triumph, everything from the TR2 all the way up to the TR8. And the TR6 is probably one of the most iconic of that TR series in that a lot of people will recognize this vehicle. And I've been a huge fan of these for a long time. The TR6, at least in America, was sold from 1968 to 1976. This, based on the commission plate, is a 1975 model. And this one does appear to have twin carburetors on it, so it's not the Lucas mechanical fuel injection or the PI, which I believe stands for petrol injection. And that's actually a good thing because the carburetors are a little more desirable, from my opinion, in terms of maintenance, drivability, and overall experience. Now you might be looking at this car and seeing that it is obviously in phenomenal cosmetic condition and wondering, well, gee, what could it need? Well, the owner has a small list of some small jobs that need to be taken care of on this vehicle, and the owner would also like us to do basically a stem to stern inspection, make sure that it is mechanically sound, and look for any other issues that could affect getting it out on the road. You see, right now we're at the tail end of winter. It's still kind of cold and nasty out, but within a few weeks we're going to have some amazing cruising weather, so it'd be really good to have this thing taken care of and get it out there. Another issue that the owners had with it that we're going to take a look at is a kind of hot run ignition issue. From what I understand, after about an hour of running, the ignition will cut out, and then the vehicle sometimes won't restart, sometimes it will. That could be anything from a wiring issue to something as innocuous as the the rotor in the distributor. We'll talk more about that as we do our inspection under the hood. So what we're going to do today, though, is we're going to walk around, show you the car, then of course we'll go under the engine compartment and we'll lift the vehicle up and do our preliminary inspection. Now, we probably won't bring the cameras along when it comes to the deep dive inspection or the deep dive work because, well, we need to focus on this for the owner and not worry about cameras. So when we do that deep dive, when we generate the report and do some of the work, we'll be able to come back afterwards and update you on things that we found and show you some of the repairs that we did on the car. In the meantime, don't worry, we've got plenty of content still to come on Vortex Garage. We've got so many things from our own vehicles. We've got a backlog of tech videos to get up and show you. But in the meantime, why don't I go ahead and grab the other camera and let's do a walk around and check out this awesome TR6. All right, so we'll do a quick walk around of this TR6. And the first thing, when you look at the shut lines, don't worry about the bonnet here. We've actually got that pop so we can open it up. But one thing I've always thought was really nice about the TR6s is, and Triumph always had a really good way of doing this, and even some other muscle cars from the 60s, of making a steel wheel look really good. So I always like the lines of these too. They have a good way of looking nice and muscular, having kind of straight lines with curves in the right spots. Kind of like this little kick up here that goes to the rear quarter panel on the door. Always thought that was cool. This particular one has some sport lights on the front from Hella. And I think that's kind of a nice rally look to it. I really like how that looks. We've got kind of our bullet style mirrors on here. That was probably one of the first things that I noticed. This is a very simple thing to take care of, but this one does appear to be loose. It looks like it just has an adjustment screw in the back. You can kind of see that screw push out a little bit. So that'll be an easy, quick thing to take care of. Take a little sneak peek inside. We'll look in there a little more in a bit. But coming around back, I think our doors still popped a little bit. That's me from working in the car. Got a nice TR6 sticker on the side. I always thought that was a cool touch on those. In the rear, this is one of my favorite things, is the quad exhausts on these. I remember as a kid always looking in the magazines and wanting the Monza pace setter exhaust. And they're definitely fitting on the TR6. I've always thought about putting them on the Spitfire, but with that little 4-cylinder on the Spitfire, I'm not so sure. I always like the design in the back too, and the blacked out panel here. I thought that looked cool, the design of how it kind of kicks up on either side. The luggage rack is fitting. I think I've got the trunk popped, so we can open that up really quick. Extremely clean inside. You can start to see some carryover parts, just like you'd see in any other vehicle, not carryover necessarily, but part spin. This looks like to be a very similar kind of trunk latch mechanism the Spitfire used. Of course, your pop-up gas filler cap there. Very race style. We all know this is one of my favorite things on the Spitfire. And then looking down the side, very clean, very excellent looking car. Here's the other bullet mirror. As you can tell, this one is a lot tighter. So we'll just tighten the other one up and that should take care of that. We'll take a look inside. First thing you see, of course, there is the Nardi steering wheel. That's a great add-on for these. Seats are in extremely nice condition. One thing that we're going to look at is the seat tracks themselves. They're kind of stuck and don't move very freely. So we'll probably take those out and take those apart and clean the tracks up and grease them. There's our nice wood dash, good instrumentation. I think our Spitfire's got 110 mile an hour speedometer. This one's 140. And this one's definitely going to have a little more power than our Spitfire would have. 2 extra cylinders, granted. I like the wooden shift knob. It does appear to be upside down. That's an issue sometimes when you put these in. You might have to shim them to get them so when you tighten it, it actually goes right side up. So we might look to shim that and get that oriented the right way. So interior-wise, there's not too much to do. The dash lights are kind of dim. The rheostat over here, which is that kind of center knob there, adjusts your brightness of your dash lights, and even at full tilt, they're never really that bright to begin with, because not like a modern vehicle where every number is backlit. Basically on these, you can kind of see on the side, there's like a little bit of an indent, and the light sort of bleeds from the sides with little bulbs inside, and that's what gives you your dash lighting. So one thing we can do, and we might do, is put some LEDs in there and see if we can brighten those up a little bit. Got an aftermarket stereo in it, so you got some tunes. Looks like we have a little microphone here for the Bluetooth, and we can probably tuck that wire in a little better and just sort of get that out of the way. But other than that, all the install in the interior looks nice. Top's in good condition, obviously been renewed. These plastic windows start to yellow and crack as they get older. So just from a factor of age, even if they're stored properly, these clear windows never quite look this good. So definitely a replaced top. All right, let's go ahead and open up the bonnet and take a look at the motor. All right, so here is our engine. This is a 2.5 liter inline six. And well, one thing you can kind of see that's obvious, we have removed the battery. I often do that when I store things in the shop. I take the batteries out for storage. That way we don't have any risk of electrical issues. One thing we'll recommend to the owner is, although our ground strap here looks pretty good, we'll probably recommend putting a ground switch on it so you can have a battery disconnect. I like to put those on all my old vehicles. And we did find the battery hold down was missing, so the battery was just sitting in there, and that can cause it to flop around. And that's bad because if you take a corner, flop it around, you hit a bump, it bounces up, hits the top of the bonnet, you could actually short out the battery, and that wouldn't be nice to the paint. All right, so a few other things that I see just on preliminary inspection. Fuel pump looks to be pretty clean and fresh, that's good. This being a 75 model year was the first year in the US they had air injection. So we have our air pump right here, and then you have your piping, your air pump valve, then you have the hose that goes over there, and then there's kind of hard lines on that side. We'll see when we walk over there. Here's our ignition system. Got your coil, you got your distributor. This is still a point system on this vehicle. Now, I made mention of the rotor as being a potential culprit. But there's a few things that could also be a culprit on this vehicle. We'll go ahead and take a look here underneath our cap. We'll make sure we keep these in order. So this is our rotor right here. And as you can see, just like the cap, it is made of, it's black color, it's black material. And most likely this is an aftermarket replacement, and there were actually problems, and I don't know if those problems have been solved with these aftermarket pieces, where they actually have an excess amount of carbon in them, which is what gives them the black color. And that carbon can actually cause problems where it'll actually sometimes arc the spark down into the plastic of the rotor due to the carbon content and essentially ground out the spark. And that can happen more when things heat up. So one thing that is out there, there is a company called Distributor Doctor that manufactures red components that are made of a special material. And they're very high grade. They're made in the UK. And those are often seen as great replacements. Now, there's a lot of aftermarket red ones now since those first came out. But I'll probably look into, if that is the issue, we'll look into some Distributor Doctor stuff and see what we can get. But another thing, if you look in here, we do have, it's a little hard to see on this camera because I can't really zoom in too good, but you see we have a little bit of a damaged ground wire there, and that's another thing that could heat up and cause a problem. So it could be as simple as that. Now, replacing a rotor is extremely inexpensive, and it's good preventative maintenance, especially with the known issues these black ones have. So again, from a reliability standpoint, what we could probably look to do is go ahead and fix up some of these ground wires. Looks like this pickup ground here. We'll have to inspect that closer, make sure it's in good condition. All of that is extremely inexpensive parts that are probably good to take care of. So when we do our deeper dive, we'll certainly be looking at some of that stuff. In the meantime, we'll go ahead and reaffix our distributor. I can't do that one-handed, so I'll come back as soon as I set the camera down. Wiring all in all is not too bad on this, but we do have some things like this alternator wire that's just covered in tape. I wonder why. I don't know why, but we'll probably look to pull that off and maybe get some high heat coating on that, something a little nicer than that electrical tape there. But really, again, that's what the deep inspection is going to be. Is that wire problematic? What's hiding under that electrical tape? That's a good question. Overflow bottle there. Everything looks good and connected. We've got a radiator shroud. Try to manipulate our camera here. You can see that a little better. Our radiator shroud. All of our hoses in first inspection look pretty nice and new and clean. So all in all, not bad. Got pretty clean brake fluid. That's awesome to see. Got our clutch master cylinder, windshield wiper motor, some more wiring. So again, deeper inspection, we'll prod along a little more on some of that stuff and take a closer look. Let's go to the other side. Got our windshield washer bottle and our pump. All that looks pretty decent. Got our twin carburetors. Everything looks pretty good on those. It seems to run well. It does have a manual choke. That does seem to work fine. Okay, we've got our motor here. We've got this kind of polished cover. And one thing I'll probably recommend or end up recommending is that we do a valve clearance check, and that'll have us pull that valve cover off. And while the valve cover is off, although it doesn't appear to be leaking, we'll probably end up putting a new gasket on it. And that would be an opportune time to put that on the buffer and polish that out a little bit. I could definitely see that coming out to a nice shine, being a nice polished aluminum piece. Everything here looks to be in pretty good shape. Windshield's nice and clean and new. Wipers are there. Everything, again, very, very nice looking on this vehicle. And no obvious signs of rot or anything like that in here. All the inner wheel tubs look good and clean. Like I said, from a cosmetic perspective, this car is in very nice condition. Okay, we'll go ahead and lower the bonnet. Let's go ahead and get it up on the lift. Now we've already had our lift positioned. We should be ready to raise it up, but still I like to always check and just make sure that our car is stable, that we're not going to have a risk of it tipping over when we lift it up. That would not be good. All right, so a few things I noticed on the way up. Well, we've got our nice air dam here is in great shape. But one thing I kind of noticed, first off, our wiring for those lights, it looks like we've got a T-tap going there, and those lights should be on a relay. So we're going to want to dig into that and make sure these are wired properly. Being that they have covers on them, I don't even know if they work. I haven't gotten that far. We've just sort of started to take a look here. Another thing I see is an air horn. I know the horn doesn't work. That was one of the things on the list. So there's an air horn here, but on this side should be where, and there it is. That looks like the original horn for the vehicle. And it's hard to tell if it is actually wired in or not. So that's one of the things we'll be looking at, is getting the horn working on this vehicle. All right, let's take a look underneath. Let's look in here. We've got a little bit of seepage. And you have to understand, being an older vehicle and being one of these old British motors, these things were never quite sealed perfect anyway. So finding little leaks on these is something that you're just going to have to deal with, and it's very common. If you've got a bad leak, it might necessitate being repaired, but something like this seepage here on the timing cover doesn't appear to be dripping and is probably fine to leave as is. Looks like we got a timing mark on our timing there, so that's good. Someone's been checking the timing recently. We'll still do that when we take a closer look at it. Oil pan is actually, that's dry. That's paint or something. That is not oil splatter on there, so that's actually clean. So that's good to see. And we got our oil filter there. Let's take a look back here. Now we have a little bit more than that's a little more than seepage back here. We have more of a drip. So the question's really going to be, where is this coming from? Is this coming from our rear main seal? Or is this coming from, I don't think it's coming from the slave cylinder. And is it engine oil? It does appear to be engine oil. So we'll need to look a little closer at where that's coming from, because it might just be coming down the back of the oil pan, or it could be coming from in between the engine and transmission. It looks like there's a little bit back here as well. All right, so that's something that we'll do a deeper dive on and see if there's any inspection covers that can get us a better look and see if we can determine. And I think that we're still looking to find out where our leak's coming from, because there's some leak up around there. You can see some pooling a little bit on our clutch slave cylinder here and down here. So part of our deeper inspection, we'll figure out where that's coming from. All of our lines look pretty decent. Now, I know this vehicle had its floor pans replaced, so I do want to check that out. You can definitely see those and some of the stuff bolted in. It's a nice new fresh floor pans. You kind of see a little bit where it looks like we got the original sheet metal. There is a little rust hole up there. There's some seam sealer. But all in all, it looks solid and put together. Let's take a look at this side. You can kind of see a little there as well. But again, not bad. You can see where they bridged in the new piece. Oh, look at that. Looks like how I used to weld in kindergarten. So that's kind of odd, a little booger weld there, trying to get that to stick. Looks like we got some welding wire sticking through. And well, that sure looks to me like a piece of sheet metal that is untreated on the end. So I think what we'll recommend here is probably, and I'll do again a deeper dive to make sure we still agree, but I'm going to want to clean that up a little bit, and we're going to want to put some rust prevention on that. So here's our exhaust. The owner did ask about a possible exhaust leak, and looking at the pipes, I just noticed something. Whoops, yeah, there it is on camera. Got a little hole there, so we might need this intermediate pipe repaired. So that could be a source of a leak. Got our hangers here. This hanger's loose, so that's going to make noise, and it's not going to properly hold these up, so we can fix that. The lines are all pretty coated with oil. This one looks coated. Let's follow that. So here's our speedometer gear. We might have a little leakage coming out of there. That's pretty common, but I see up there, let me show you. That looks like, I would assume that's the reverse lamp switch, and that is definitely leaking. So whether or not it's the module itself, or it's crimped, or if it's just the seal going in, that does appear to be leaking. So that's an easy fix. Looks like these pipes are a lot newer, so this is probably more original. Whereas if you look here, and this goes back to the performance exhaust. Those are a little more new. We're kind of jumping back, but that's all right. Take a look at our output shafts on our differential. Our pinion is dry. Output shafts are dry. Nice. Independent rear suspension. Our frame rails look nice. Sills look nice. So look at this. This is what gets me. All right. And you've seen us do a lot of spot welding on our vehicle. And the spot welds, the quality of these spot welds look nice, but what do you see on them? Rust. So whoever spot welded these never came in and put coatings over this. So these spot welds are basically just left open to the elements. So we're going to need to recommend coming in here and just sanding those down a little bit, cleaning them up, and then putting some rust converter and protectant over it, because you don't want this thing to develop new rust on all the hard work you did on those floor pans. So that's unique. Looks like some fresh hose there. That's fuel line. All right, so let's go back to the front. One thing I always want to check is our wheels here. Can you hear that? We've got a little bit of play, none side to side, but up and down we have a little bit of play. So that could be a wheel bearing, though we don't really feel it this way. So it could be like a ball joint or a trunnion. And so we'll take a look with our other camera and see what we got. Let's check the other side. All right, this side's tight. This side's tight. So we got a little bit of looseness on the left-hand side there. All right, let's take a look here. This is our front suspension. And see, we've got what looks to be a newer tie rod. Looks like we got a new upper ball joint. But look at our lower trunnion there. And that trunnion looks pretty caked with road dirt and grease. And we can certainly grease those, but I would want to inspect those trunnions and make sure that they're tight and good. Control arms all look good. Looks like we've got good bushings on our sway bar. Rack boot looks pretty good on this side. Brake hose looks nice and clean. So preliminary look here, everything looks decent. Let's take a look at this side. This is the one that was moving a little bit on us. And looks like, again, we've got a new tie rod. We do have a new ball joint up there. Brake lines look good. Nice shocks and springs. Oh, here's an interesting one. Looks like we've got a bad boot. See, that boot's torn and no longer held on, and there's some stuff coming out of it. So I think it is okay for there to be a little bit of grease and fluid in there. This is a manual rack, so I don't know exactly. We'll have to look in the service manual to double check. But for certain, it needs a new gaiter. And let's look in here. Let's see if I can get my camera to view. Look at the clamp. See that wire? That should be around the boot, and it's been torn off or not installed or whatever. So definitely that's one of the things on the list that's going to need repair. And again, our trunnion looking a little greasy there. What we'll do in our deeper inspection is figure out exactly where our looseness is. We'll determine if it's wheel bearing. It could be a wheel bearing adjustment, could need a new wheel bearing, or it could be the trunnions. I doubt it's the ball joint since the ball joint's new, but you never know. It always could be. All right, so looking down the side of the car here, we can see our rocker panels look nice and clean. We've checked out our front suspension. We've looked at our frame. We found a hole in the exhaust. We found a few leaks. Frame looks good here. Let's take a look back here and see what we got. As I freak out my camera. Some KYB GR2s. Looks like, it kind of looks like an aluminum drum. Nice thin drum on there to help keep them cool. Differential mounts look pretty new. Our exhaust mounts off of those look good. Some nice paint back here. Our trunk pan looks pretty clean. The vent line. Whoops. Looks like we probably have a new wheel cylinder there in our drum, so that's good. And coming out and seeing that cool exhaust. All right, let's go ahead and lower it off the lift. All right, let's go ahead and reattach our distributor while I got my two hands. So one more thing that I kind of noticed when we were coming down there in S also when I was pulling it in is we're going to have to check our steering wheel for straightness. I noticed it looked like our wheels were turned slightly, so I'm not sure that the wheel is fully on center. So we might need to check the alignment on the vehicle as well. So obviously we have found a few things that we're going to need to deep dive in, and we'll come up with a report for some recommendations for the owner. And then of course we'll let you know in follow-up videos how things go. But I hope you enjoyed this video. In the meantime, a nice look at this quite beautiful and awesome Triumph TR6. And like I said, it only needs a few small things, some tiny things that will make it a nice, safe, reliable cruiser, and definitely and hopefully enjoyable for the owner to take out in the nice weather that we have coming up. So we'll let you know how things go, but otherwise I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more, drop us a like and a subscribe, and we'll certainly have more content for you here on Vortex Garage.